But we started doing trials with a large chemical manufacturer in both Texas and Nebraska, doing precision spot treatments for mesquite, cedar, and juniper in those areas on large acreage.
From invasive species control to fly management and even feed delivery in some remote terrain. Kelly Wittenberg with Central UAS Technologies joins us as she shares how drone technology is quickly becoming a real tool for ranchers.
I think that drones not only are cheaper than a manned aircraft and a lot of other ways to do these treatments, but they're also just getting so much smarter and so much more able to do things that we haven't been able to do in other ways.
Then later, I'll visit with meteorologist Don Day as we take a look at the fall and winter weather outlook.
One wild card this winter that we didn't have last winter is I do see the potential for more snowfall and maybe some bigger winter storms to contend with this winter.
Drone technology for the ranch and long-range weather forecast for the months ahead. That's on today's episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills, host of the Working Ranch Radio Show, and good to have you joining us on our program today. As you heard there in the opening, we're going to be covering a couple different topics. Of course, meteorologist Don Day is usually with us in every program, but today a little bit longer as we're not only going to do and take a look at our long-range weather forecast, but he'll also kind of give us an update of what the winter time, fall and winter, he anticipates for that to look across the country. We'll do that in the latter part of the show. And then, of course, the front part of the show, we're going to be looking at some of the drone technology and how it can be applied in the cattle business. And I'm not talking about what we have talked on here before, meaning smaller style drones, but this is much larger. I think you'll find it very, very fascinating. So be sure to tune in for that here later today. Be sure to stay tuned in for that as we'll get into that in just a few moments. Now, one thing I did want to mention, the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine is probably about to your mailbox if it's not already, so be sure to look for that. And if you don't have a copy, you can start your subscription by going to workingranchmag.com, or you can stop by your local Tractor Supply store and pick one up right there off the shelf. And a shout out here today to the Tractor Supply store in Dawsonville, Georgia, and in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota, in Defiance, Ohio, and in Valparaiso, Indiana. So be sure to be looking out for the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine. Hey, here's the topic for next week's show. Just thought I'd give you a little bit of a hint. Might be a reason to come back and listen to next week's show. 10 reasons you should quit making hay. I know that's going to spark a little bit of interest there, so be sure to tune in next week on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking drones, and I'm not talking about the little ones. I'm talking about the ones that have a considerable load capacity and how they can be used in ranching. So stick around. This segment today brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association. Meet modern industry demands for feedlots and carcass traits with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics. Find out more at gelbvieh.org.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influence females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. This year, make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics.
Let's get into our topic here today, and if you are a regular listener to the Working Ranch Radio Show, you probably heard me from time to time reference the fact that I operate a drone. Now, it's a small drone, a Phantom 4 Pro that we've used for several years. I think I'm on 6-7 years that we've had used one, and we've got 3 of them here that we use, so we always have one kind of in the stable should something happen to them. And if you follow me on Facebook, you know that oftentimes we do have some wrecks, but nevertheless, we have used them. But today we're going to be talking about drone technology at a completely different level. And I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. I know for me, I was so intrigued with the conversation. This was just going to be a one-segment interview to talk with our guests here today about this, but I had enough questions and I felt some of the information was extremely relevant to all of us here in the livestock business that it ended up being a longer conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce my guest here today, Kelly Wittenberg, who is in technical sales for Central UAS Technologies, which is a sister company to Central Life Sciences. That's a name that we've heard here in the livestock business for several years now. And Kelly, good to have you here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Yeah, Justin, thanks for having me.
Well, as we were talking before we went on air, and I kind of shared with you guys a little bit of my history previously with technology, I'm intrigued to learn more about that here today as it has continued to just advance over the years very, very quickly in a very positive way with that in mind. But I want to back up a little bit because you've been a part of this. I know with your involvement in Leading Edge, which has been a part of this. Explain a little bit about that and where your involvement came years ago and where we're at here today.
Sure, absolutely. So you're right. Before we were known as Central UAS Technologies, we were called Leading Edge Associates and Leading Edge Aerial Technologies. And we kind of came from a foundation of a lot of data, a lot of research, and started focusing out primarily on software for droplet and swath characterization and analysis with our Leading Edge Associates company. And then that kind of evolved into our Map Vision software, which is a geospatial database management system. All of this primarily focused on the mosquito control industry. And that eventually led to our entry into the drone application business. So Bill Reynolds, our president, started out for years and years with a company prior to this doing droplet, swath, drift offset analysis for manned aircraft. As we developed this software, he got into this idea of let's do all of this, but using drones, because this is kind of the way of the future. Mm-hmm. And we actually started out as a dealer for a different drone company. And we used our software and analyzed some of that effective swath with the droplet spectrum that we were getting and realized, hey, this is not really getting us up to the level where we're on par with manned aircraft. Now, we're not talking about the volume of applications at that time, but the quality of applications. And so Bill Reynolds at that time said, all right, we're going to do it ourselves. And Leading Edge Aerial Technologies was born in 2012. We started manufacturing our own drones in 2016, sold our first drone in 2017, which, believe it or not, is still in operation. I met one of the guys who flies that drone. He works for a mosquito control district on the eastern seaboard. And it cracks me up. He said, I can't kill this thing. I want to get a bigger one because, of course, the size has grown over time. Mm-hmm. But that just shows kind of the engineering that we put into it. Mm-hmm. We were acquired last year in November by Central Life Sciences. Our parent company is Central Garden and Pet, which is a large publicly traded organization. But we had worked closely for years with Central Life Sciences, primarily in that mosquito control realm. You know, they do a lot of mosquito control products, granular larvicide for young mosquitoes and adulticides for adult mosquitoes. And it was kind of a natural partnership there. And so with that acquisition, now we have gained access to expertise and a network across a number of different verticals, as we call them, or industries. So this has given us a foray into the cattle market, into widespread row crop ag, specialty ag, and again, much deeper knowledge into that mosquito control realm as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of that background.
Yeah. And Kelly, in a bit, I want to go a little bit further into the livestock side of things and where you're going with that. But as you, in this partnership now with Central Garden and Pet, as you move forward in this, where do you think it's going to go? Are there things you're going to be changing with anything based upon now being acquired by a different company?
So one of the great things about Central Garden and Pet and Central Life Sciences is that their core competency is in this ability to acquire companies, but allowing them to stay true to themselves. So Central has given us resources that were not available to us in the past, not only monetary resources, but just a wealth of information and knowledge from all of these employees that work here. But they've allowed us to operate still as ourselves and keep what makes us good and take from them what will make us better. So that has been a great part of this partnership, and it's allowed us to do a lot more R&D, to incorporate a lot more technology in a quicker way than we would have been able to do on our own.
All right. Before we jump into the applications where you're looking at and where you've found to work with cattle, I want to address one other issue. And I think when it comes to drone technology, this is something, and we talked about this before we went on here today, the concern in that technology with where those units, where that technology is being manufactured and being made. And there has been concern in the past that a lot of that is not made in the United States. What about this technology? Is it made here in the United States?
Yes. So we are headquartered in Daytona Beach, Florida. We've got a second manufacturing facility in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and we design and manufacture our drones in both of those locations. We, over time, have gotten as far away from Chinese components as we can. And that has been a big factor, not only for security reasons, but also for supply chain reasons. You know, with all of this ongoing kind of tariff situation, with supply issues for other Chinese manufacturers, we have been able to continue on and, like I said, distance ourselves as much as possible. It's still an ongoing process, of course. There are various components like lithium batteries that you're still kind of going to be connected to China in some way. But all of our internal kind of brains of our drone are made in the United States, or there's a component that's made in Japan, but everything else is NDAA Section 889 compliant, which is a huge deal when you're thinking about security and some of these bans that are starting to happen across states and, of course, federal agencies. So we're based out of Florida. Florida banned the use of Chinese drones for state operations years ago. And so we had to get all NDAA certified at that time and kind of had to cross a few of these hurdles prior to a lot of other companies because of that. And that was a blessing and a curse because, you know, doing all that paperwork is never fun. But kind of crossing that bridge early got us to the place where we are now, where we've got great relationships with Bureau of Land Management, with USDA, with Tennessee Valley Authority. We're able to sell directly to them and other government agencies, in addition to the state of Florida, state of Texas, and other states that are starting to ban as well.
Okay, Kelly, let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to now get into how does this fit? How does this match up to us as ranchers in the ranching industry? I think that's the next question we need to get to in this, so let's do that after this break. This segment today brought to you by the ManSaver Post Driver by Rohr Manufacturing, the portable, lightweight, and easy-to-use pneumatic post driver where the name speaks for itself. When it comes to building fence, driving those steel posts can be exhausting and absolutely backbreaking. But there is another way you could be doing this. Now, I'm not talking about those bulky and expensive gas-powered or hydraulic pounders. What I'm talking about is the ManSaver Post Driver. Yeah, it's called the ManSaver Post Driver by Rohr Manufacturing. This is a portable, lightweight, easy-to-use post driver that runs off of any small air compressor and is 100% made in the USA. The ManSaver Post Driver comes in a variety of models, from driving posts ranging from vineyard stakes to T-posts and all the way up to 3.5-inch diameter posts. While it may be called the ManSaver Post Driver, shoot, I've heard some go as far as calling it the Marriage Saver Post Driver. But take a look for yourself. See it in action when you go to their website at rohrmfg.com. That's ROHRERMFG.com. Or if you want to talk to a real person, give them a call at 800-980-7599. The ManSaver Post Driver, the portable, lightweight, and easy-to-use pneumatic post driver where the name speaks for itself. All right, let's start jumping into application now and looking at that, because I know the majority of our listeners are ranchers and they're thinking about, okay, how is this applicable to me? So from that standpoint, as you'd mentioned earlier, some of the early things were mosquito control and things, how that was being used. But now with coming under the umbrella with Central Life Sciences and the Central Garden and Pet, where were you looking at there in terms of its applications for the livestock industry, for cattle?
Yep. So on the cattle side specifically, it's a kind of a funny story. Now, we have been doing a lot of weed and pest control for many, many years, especially with invasive species in areas that are difficult to get to, aquatic plant management based out of Florida. We've got a ton of lakes, rivers, waterways that are choked up with a lot of invasive species. So that's something that we had been doing for quite some time. But we got into the cattle side of the business because Bill Reynolds had a contact either at Central Life Sciences or elsewhere that said, you guys really should think about getting into this cattle market. You need to go to this beef cattle short course, which is held each year at Texas A&M in College Station. And I was voluntold to go to this beef cattle short course. Bill said, hey, somebody told me that we really need to be here. You need to go find out why. And so I went kind of blind last year, so in 2024, just to get an idea of what are people looking for in the cattle industry? What are the problems that we need to address, and how can we help with that? And so I dove in headfirst at that first beef cattle short course, and I sit in the back of the room frantically Googling all these terms and everything. And I'm like, oh, everybody's going to think I'm an idiot. But I really learned a lot about the cattle industry, some ways that we can assist now with our existing technology, and some ways that we can move forward and enhance that technology to do things that nobody's doing yet.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that is weed and invasive species management in pasture and rangeland areas. There are a couple ways that we do that currently. So like I said, we've been doing invasive species management for a while, primarily with weed and pest control districts. You're in Wyoming. We have several different weed and pest districts in Wyoming that are using our drones for that invasive species management. But we started doing trials with a large chemical manufacturer in both Texas and Nebraska, doing precision spot treatments for mesquite, cedar, and juniper in those areas on large acreage. And the way that works is that you take an aerial image of all of this large acreage, you orthomosaic those images together, so it geotags all that imagery. There are some AI tools that exist currently and some that we're working on that can help identify those invasive species and geotag those specific species that you want to treat. You can then upload that geotagged information to our spray drone, and it can go out with an RTK base station to get a precision spot treatment of within 3 centimeters to treat those invasive species. So that's one thing that we started doing right away as a result of that kind of cattle discussion, as well as collaboration with that chemical manufacturer. But then those next steps that we're taking are incorporating AI into our drone in the future to where we've got more of a seek and destroy technology. So whereas you've got those multi-steps to get to the point where you can spray those weeds currently, next generation is going to have that AI where it can detect a weed, recognize it, spray it, mark it as sprayed, and move to the next one without kind of those multiple steps to go through.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating. And again, the use of AI technology, and this is with the combination of the drone technology, the baseline of that is making it extremely efficient. Yes.
Well, and the more efficient and more effective it can be, and the easier that it can be for the end user, the better. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one side of the spectrum when we're talking about cattle is treating the land that those cattle are on. The other side is treating for mosquitoes, flies, other, insects and disturbances that are on the flies themselves or in their environment. So I already talked a little bit about how we have done mosquito control extensively in our past. And that applies to this pasture and rangeland areas as well. I was at the Florida Cattlemen's Association a couple months ago, and we had a whole dinner that was focused on mosquito control in these cattle areas, because that's a big concern with spread of West Nile, Eastern equine, dengue, all sorts of really bad illnesses. So that's something that these drones can address very efficiently and easily. And the next steps, we're talking more on the imagery side where, hey, we want to be able to look at these cattle, do head count, which is kind of that baseline level, but also look at, okay, can we use AI to look at these cattle and detect health and all sorts of other markers that work with ear tags and things like that? Can we look at feed bunks? Can we look at all number of factors to make a determination? That way we can be proactive with these treatments. So those are all things kind of current, near-term future, and more far in the distant future that we're working on.
Yeah. Well, it's intriguing because I had some questions lined up because as you were talking about land use, I think for a lot of us, we knew that's where it was at, but even to hear how AI technology can come into that. My next question was, okay, now the specific animals, you answered that. And one of the things that I think is interesting, Kelly, is that I think it was the last show we might have done on our program here. We were talking about how cattle have a tendency to group together when they're battling fly control. And of course, and I think our show was on heat stress and how we can alleviate some of that heat stress. And if cattle will spread out a little bit, they can alleviate that. And some of that comes to do with fly management, which gets back to what we're talking about here in some ways with the cattle and being able to have some fly management.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, with the products that Central Life makes for fly management, we're able to do a lot of testing now on different ways to apply via drone. So whether it be feed lanes where we're putting down granular black fly treatment or direct treatment to cattle themselves of a black fly product that drips down onto them. Those are things that we're working on currently. And we've found ways that work. And, we've heard horror stories from other people who have maybe gone out themselves to try some things that haven't worked. So those are things that, again, this partnership with Central Life just brings a wealth of resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Kelly, let's start talking about the specific drones themselves. I think you've done a good job of outlining where it could be applied, where it could be used in our ranching operations. Let's talk about them. I know there's the Precision Vision 100X. That's the newest model out there. I know there's some other ones, but break those down a little bit. And I've got some other questions about those after you've done that.
Absolutely. So all of our drones are known under that Precision Vision name. So that it is specific to our drones. Our first drone that we ever manufactured was the Precision Vision, or PV-13, corresponded to a 13-pound payload capacity. And you're right, our current model that we've just released is our Precision Vision, or PV-100X, which is a 100-pound payload capacity. So you can see over time, they're getting bigger and badder. So not only do we have a larger payload capacity, but we've got a lot of really great features that make it efficient and easy to use. So with that PV-100X, like all of our drones, we've got interchangeable payload systems. We've got a liquid payload system, which is great for all manner of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, all the sides. And what's unique about our liquid payload system is that we have a boom and nozzle configuration, which gives you a spray pattern that's a little bit more reliable, like a manned aircraft, but it also allows you to customize your spray because you can select any number of nozzle and any type of nozzle that you'd like on that boom, depending on what you need that day, all the way down to one single downward facing nozzle if you want to do precision spot treatments. So that's the liquid payload system. We've also got a granular payload system that we use for seeding. We do a lot of cover crop seeds, grass seeds, a lot of ant bait applications, and like I said earlier, a lot of granular larviciding for mosquito control. Now that granular payload system, depending on the material, but looking at, let's just say, cover crop seeds, you're getting between a 55 and 90 foot swath width on those granules. So that's a really efficient way to do a treatment of any granular material. Those payloads can be changed out within just a couple of minutes right in the field. Super simple. And you're able to do a number of different types of mission with either of those payload systems. So right from the ground control station itself, you can draw a polygon if you want to do a broadcast treatment. You can draw points if you want to do precision spot treatments, or you can draw a path. Say you want to do a fence line or a ditch, canal, something like that. You can just spray along that path, and you can select sections of no spray if you want to have areas that you're not spraying as well. We've made it as simple as possible, and every day that software is becoming more and more advanced.
Kelly, you were talking about payloads and we're talking about how it can be used to apply, liquid or granular type stuff. Let's real quick just back up and talk about the camera on it.
So the camera that we have on our spray drones is a camera with a gimbal that you can move up and down so that you can see what you're applying at any time. Now, if you want to do advanced aerial imagery of any land or cattle or anything like that, then you would want to use one of our upcoming imagery drones that will be debuting some prototypes very shortly. So you can use a spray drone to do aerial imagery. We have, a universal mount that you can attach LiDAR, you can do RGB, multispectral, hyperspectral, thermal, whatever type of imagery you'd like. But when you're talking about large acreage, you are going to need a lot of flight time. And so that's kind of where the difference lies between those imagery drones and our heavy lift drones is if you want, up to 3 hours of flight time to do hundreds, thousands of acres, you need a drone that's a little bit lighter. So you can do imagery with a heavy lift spray drone, but if you want to do large acreage, one of those imagery drones is going to be a better option for you.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're going to be debuting some of those imagery drones soon at the Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas, September 2nd through 4th. We'll have a VTOL, which is a vertical takeoff and landing drone. Like I said, flight time up to 3 hours, a lot of really cool AI features. And then we'll also have a quadcopter as well. Okay. I guess your listeners here are getting a little bit of a sneak preview about some of those upcoming technologies on the horizon.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Okay, now the next question that always comes up is, I don't know if I could fly that. What's the ease in flying this machinery?
Well, I like to say that we've made them almost idiot proof because if I can do it, anybody can do it. So one thing that we really pride ourselves on is that when we sell a drone, we sell it with 3 full days of training included in the purchase price. And in that training, we will teach you to fly the drone manually, to do autonomous mission planning, and to do some basic servicing and maintenance as well so that you can keep yourself in operation constantly. But when you're doing these drone treatments and you're spraying, 90+% of the time, you're going to be flying autonomously. And that's where that mission planning comes into effect when you're doing your polygons, your points, or your paths. And we make that as simple as we can because we don't force you to do it one specific way. You can do it right from the ground control station with your fingers or a stylus. You can use the drone itself to drop points so that you can map out a field right there on the fly. Or you can do all of your mission planning ahead of time from a laptop using any sort of software that you want to use to do that. So if you've already got a program in place where you're using QGIS, ArcGIS, any of that mission planning software, you can take that and put it onto our drone and continue doing things like you like to do then.
Yeah, we've kind of worked through this. I think there's definitely some interest. I really see where it's, some applicability for our cattle industry. And as we move forward in this and we continue to see advancements with this, what does the advantages do with this partnership with Central Life Sciences for the livestock market?
Right. So, we've talked a little bit about some of the things that we already have in play with Central as far as testing out black fly treatments and other sort of pesticide treatments with cattle. But really, the big thing that we're looking forward to is this enhanced research and development to create a better tool to solve so many different problems with one drone or one kind of holistic approach to this treatment process. And so we have partnered with Central to do the testing. We're working with Central on education. We're working with Central on research and development. And all of those things within a very short time frame are going to lead to more effective and more efficient drone applications with the PV systems and with our imagery systems down the line as well.
Yeah. Kelly, just one final question before we throw out some more information where people can go if they're interested to look and do some research on their own. But as we move forward and look ahead in this, I know you've already talked about a few things that are coming down the pike, but as we look ahead, what else can we expect from all of this in our livestock industry?
So I would expect to see a lot more drones out in the air as we drive around. One thing that when Central was looking at entering this drone industry, of course, they did their due diligence. They did a lot of research on what the market looks like in the future. And from 2025 to 2030, there's an estimated 25% compounded adjusted growth rate in this drone market. I think that's probably on the low side. I think that drones not only are cheaper than a manned aircraft in a lot of other ways to do these treatments, but they're also just getting so much smarter and so much more able to do things that we haven't been able to do in other ways. I just had a guy from really mountainous region of Idaho reach out, and he's interested in purchasing a drone because during the winter, he can't get out to his range cattle that are up in the mountains. The only thing that he can access is this river that goes through the area. And so he's going to use one of our drones to pick up feed blocks to deposit to those cattle in those areas that you can't get to. Not only that, but he's going to be able to use the drone for spraying, for scattering seeds and things like that. And those are the things that as we talk more with people in the cattle industry, people in the ag industry, and all of these different markets, then we find new use cases and new ways that we can use our existing technology and grow our future technology in ways that we never would have realized before. So like I said, the more we explore these areas, the quicker we're able to make these different technology updates. And so it's like this exponential growth, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's to hear the different uses of it. And I think where you guys, initially sending you down to some of these conferences and saying, here's where this could be headed. I think there's a lot of application as we move forward beyond what you've already been doing and what we already talked about here today that we're going to continue to see. And I'm excited, as I was telling you guys before we went on air here today. I've been operating drones for several years. I like the technology. It's been very useful for me in a ranch, and I continue to see its future as we move forward. So as we were talking here today, I was on your website looking at the different drones we were talking about. CentralUAStech.com is that website. Kelly, that's kind of the spot to go first. Is there any other ways if folks are wanting to find out more information?
Yes. So you're right. CentralUAStech.com. That's the perfect hub to start answering some of your questions, get a little bit more information. You can email me directly, kwittenberg@central.com, or you can call me at 386-562-4716. That is my cell phone number. Give me a call. That's one big perk of working with a company that's based in the United States is you don't have to wait until 3 a.m. to get an answer. You've got us all day, every day,
and the nice
whether
thing,
you like it or not.
And the nice thing is, Kelly, is I can understand you.
Yes, that is a big perk. So, we're easily accessible, if not too accessible.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think when people make this kind of an investment, they want to know that they can reach out and get a hold of somebody and work through that process. So, Kelly, thanks for being here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show, a technology that I think, as you had said, continues to grow. And thanks for being here today and explaining some of this and its application to the livestock industry.
Thank you very much for having us.
You bet. And again, our guest today, Kelly Wittenberg. She's with Technical Sales for Central UAS Technology. If you're fascinated, want to find out more about this technology and the drone applications and how it can be used in the livestock business, you can go to their website again that we talked about before. It is centraluastech.com, or you can also give her a call, like she said, at 386-562-4716. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, meteorologist Don Day steps in. We've got him a little bit longer today, and while I had him here, I wanted to visit about what he anticipates for the fall and winter outlook. Plus, of course, as we always do, we'll have a look at our long-range weather forecast with meteorologist Don Day, so stick around. Here's the Captain Tim O'Byrne now with this.
Hey everybody, Tim here. We're fixing to come up on 1 million downloads of our Working Ranch Radio Show podcast, which is really exciting. And it got me to thinking about another viral moment that we had back in 2017 when we ran a short Facebook video of the Safety Zone calf catchers. And it was so popular, it got 6.8 million views in the first 5 days. I want you folks to check it out, Safety Zone calf catchers. It's a great product for all producers. Keep you safe when you're working with baby calves, especially for old timers like me who maybe can't outrun those cows anymore. Check them out, Safety Zone Calf Catchers.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone Calf Catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone Calf Catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
And joining us now is meteorologist Don Day with kind of an extended weather segment here today and on our program today. And Don, good to have you back here. I know we've been off for a couple of weeks, and I wanted to bring you back on here today so that we could not only do our long-range weather that we'll do in the next segment, but I know you have already released some information out there looking ahead and what the fall and winter may look like. And I guess I'll just start there. It's kind of been an unprecedented summer for a lot of folks across the country. And so what do you anticipate as we look into fall and winter?
Well, the way the summer pattern has evolved, it does give us maybe some clues on what we're going to see this fall and winter season, which is going to be a bit different than last winter. This summer has ended up being different than the last couple of summers. It wasn't as hot as forecast, and we had the return of some really good moisture in some areas east of the Rockies. Then we went into severe drought on the western side of the Rockies. But more of the nation is not in drought than is in drought. Now, and there's some good reasons for that. You and I talk about La Nina and El Nino all the time. But we went back to La Nina for most of 2024. And we saw it fade this spring into a neutral situation. And we're still in that neutral situation right now, slightly trending towards maybe being a little bit colder, a little La Nina-like. And that will probably continue through November. But we're expecting the sea surface temperature anomalies in the subtropical Pacific to start to warm up a little bit as we get into that December through February timeframe, which is the opposite. Last year, that part of the world the waters were getting colder, not getting warmer. And that led to a winter season that, if we go back and look at the winter of 2024, it was actually colder than average for a lot of the nation, from the plains through the Great Lakes in the Northeast. But it wasn't a very productive winter with snowfall. There really wasn't a lot of snowfall over a lot of the nation. No one reported a ton. This winter, I think we're going to see a similar temperature pattern. A lot of the nation east of the Rockies will experience a colder than average winter, but one wild card this winter that we didn't have last winter is I do see the potential for more snowfall and maybe some bigger winter storms to contend with this winter.
Okay. All right. So as we look ahead, you talked a little bit about the Pacific weather or Pacific temperature of the water there. What other elements besides that are you watching that's giving you that indication?
Well, there's another part of the Pacific which I neglected to mention, and that's the North Pacific. It's not as much of a factor during the summer as it is in the fall and the winter, but we just talked about the subtropics, basically what was going on in the equator. But in the winter, we closely watch what's going on from the Gulf of Alaska westward all the way to the northeast coast of Russia, Korea, northeast coast of Japan, because we've noticed that those water temperatures make a big difference in how the winter will go. For most of the summer, that part of the North Pacific has been a little bit warmer. And I do think that's one reason why the summer was cooler than expected, because when we have a warmer North Pacific, we tend to have high pressure there, and that tends to allow the door to open to Canadian cold fronts. And we experienced that this summer. We're experiencing it here at the end of summer with a couple of pretty strong cold fronts here recently. And as we go into winter, it's still expected to overall be warmer. That is a cold signal. And so that is something that is likely going to influence our temperatures. Basically, what happens is if you have high pressure more often than not from the Gulf of Alaska through the Aleutians, that's an area you watch very closely. The way the globe works, the way the pattern tends to come together is if there's high pressure there, there's low pressure over North America, which then opens the door to Canadian air. That is going to be a real key factor for this upcoming winter, is what's going to go on in the North Pacific. And when we look at a warm North Pacific and a neutral La Nina, El Nino situation, historically, those winters tend to be colder and snowy. And the last time we've seen this pattern was the winter season of 2019 and 20. So we're going back to that year to use as what we call our proxy or our analog. And for folks home listening, if you want to know what we think this winter will be like, we think it'll be similar, not exact, but similar to the fall of 2019 and the winter of 2020.
Okay, so that gives us a good idea of all of that. Is there any area that you're seeing that's going to be maybe a drier winter than they typically would have due to the conditions?
Yeah, there's one area of the country that if we look back at similar winters that is a little bit warmer and drier, that may end up being the Pacific Northwest. That may be Washington, Oregon, Northern California. They may, especially early in the winter season, be closer to that high pressure ridge I talked about in the North Pacific, and that may negate the flow of moisture off the Pacific for a part of the winter there. So that's one area that I think may not be as stormy. And I think California and the desert Southwest could be in a similar situation. However, I think on the back end of winter into March, April, and May, those locations I just mentioned, their fortunes will probably reverse. But I think for the core of winter, December, January, and February, that Pacific Northwest and the West Coast and the Southwestern United States may be a bit warmer and drier.
Well, and of course, when we look at a drought monitor map right now, though, that is the dry area of the country as well. So it's going to kind of compound that a little bit, wouldn't it?
It would. And I do think that the drought will get worse before it gets better there. However, if we think the Pacific will go as we think it should when we get into March, April, and May, is that there is a chance we may go into a weak El Nino, which would increase the prospects of rain and mountain snow in that last part of winter into spring for that part of the country. So the cavalry may be on the way. It's just that there are a few ridges over. It's going to be a little late to the game, but they're going to get there. If you look at the rest of the country east of the Rockies, it's hard to find any severe drought anywhere. And that's due to what happened this spring and summer.
Yeah. Okay. If folks were listening, you probably kind of have an idea what we were talking about with east of the Continental Divide for this winter. But just to kind of recap that a bit, it's going to be a little drier, or maybe not as much snowfall in the west, but east of that Continental Divide, anticipating, again, as you had said, a little more snowfall than what we probably had in the past.
Yeah, and on the whole, temperatures are going to be colder than average, but expect some ups and downs, which means there will be fluctuations. You could end up with a pretty big snow event and then, have 3 or 4 days where it warms up nicely behind it. It's hard to lock in severe cold in this type of pattern to where you can have long periods of extended cold. So that's one good thing. But every time you have a warm up and a cool down, that means something's going to be coming through that could bring some winter weather.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, that kind of gives us an idea for some of us. I think in our situation right now, Don, is we're seeing a little bit of a cooler than what we expected summer. I mean, not necessarily cooler than what you told us, because I remember us talking back last spring that you didn't think it was going to be as hot as what some had predicted. But we are, as you and I were talking before we went on air, we're in the latter part of August, first part of September here. And I mean, it feels like the 20th of September. And so that weather being a little bit cooler has a tendency to make people think, well, geez, are we going to have an early winter? But that's not necessarily the case.
Not necessarily the case, but I do think that the trend we're seeing here late summer and into the early parts of fall with that warmer North Pacific does increase the risk of an earlier shot of cold and winter this fall than we've seen in previous years. So climatologically speaking, that first real big shot of really cold weather this fall is likely to arrive earlier this year than the last 3 falls. But from a climatological standpoint, it really won't be all that unusual.
All right. Very good. Okay, Don, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll do our typical long-range weather that we look at for the next couple of weeks. We'll do that when we come back.
Sounds good.
All right. This segment today brought to you by Allflex. It all starts with the TAG, the most trusted portfolio of ID solutions.
It all starts with the TAG. Identifying each animal allows you to better manage the entire herd and control your operation's future. For nearly 70 years, producers have chosen Allflex for individual animal management. With Allflex, you get the most trusted portfolio of ID solutions. Whether you need stock or custom visual tags, electronic tags, tissue sampling units for DNA collection, or syringes, bring the Allflex advantage to your operation today. Visit allflexusa.com to learn more.
Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long-Range Cattle Dewormer. And when we look at cattle dewormer, one of the things we want is long-term results. With 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose, Long-Range Cattle Dewormer will help you get there. You know, there was a study done a few years ago where they were treating yearlings on that. They saw a gain of 23 more pounds per head compared to those treated with generic ivermectin. If you want bigger gains and stronger returns when it comes to sale day, start with Long Range. Learn more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, Don, as we continue now and look at our long-range weather forecast, what do you anticipate as we turn the pages on another calendar month and look ahead into the month of September?
Well, for folks in the Midwest and the Northern Plains and the Great Lakes, I'm thinking that any really extended hot summer weather is just not on the table. We're going to see a couple of more strong cold fronts over the next couple of weeks that will keep temperatures on the whole below average from the plains through that Midwest Great Lakes area. And that's going to back up against the east slopes of the Rockies. So we're seeing Canada being very busy in the month of August. We tend to see that, especially late August, you start to see more fronts that bring in some cooler air. But the month of August started hot in some areas, but it's going to end cooler. And September is going to start off cooler than average. The exception is going to be the Pacific Northwest and California, which are going to be hot. Now, I have to say, if you look at temperatures since June, from Seattle to San Francisco to San Diego, they've had a cool summer. I mean, one thing you haven't heard in the news this summer is about a heat wave in California. They haven't had one until now. So when it gets hot there this time of year, you're going to cool off in the nation's midsection. So yes. September is going to be off to a cooler than average start for a lot of the U.S.
Is there much moisture? A lot of times, you know, when it is cooler, especially like in the spring of the year, we always talk about those cooler temperatures below normal do bring moisture. Is that the same at this point in time?
Yeah, there is going to be some moisture with this front. Now, Canadian fronts on their own don't bring a lot of moisture with them, but they will interact with the higher humidity air that's sitting out in the plains. And as these fronts get down to the Gulf Coast, the southern plains, that will produce a fair amount of rain. We're also hoping that maybe we can get one more slug of subtropical moisture to come into the southwestern United States. In the past week, it finally rained decently in western Colorado, Utah, parts of New Mexico and Arizona, western areas of Wyoming and eastern Idaho, which have been very, very dry. Got some really good rain this past week. There is an opportunity that some of those areas may see some moisture come up out of Mexico again as we get into early to mid-September. We even saw rain get back into Southern California and the Sierra Nevada. So that was really good to see. There might be one more opportunity for that to happen before we're fully into that drier fall pattern that starts to set up in the basin.
Yeah, and there's those areas you talked about that had seen some rain, needed some rain. Boy, they still need some more. I look at just looking at a drought map here, northwestern Colorado and down into the border between Arizona and New Mexico, southern Arizona, New Mexico, and just that whole spine from there all the way up into Canada or in northern United States. It's just so dry.
Yeah, and it's like someone took a pencil or a marker and drew along the Continental Divide and said, on the west side of this line, you're not getting any rain. On the east side, you're going to get a lot. And that's how it's gone all summer until here recently. It's not going to be enough to alleviate the drought conditions, but it is well timed to help out with the fire danger and some other things. And if we can get one more round, that will certainly help, because it gets really hard to get precipitation of any consistency once we get into that fall season on the western slope. Until you start getting the winter storms and the late fall storms that can bring in some better chances of moisture.
You bet. All right, Don. Well, appreciate you sticking around a little longer today, giving us an outlook for the coming winter, fall and winter. Appreciate that. And look at our long-range weather here for this week. Good to visit with you.
Likewise.
And again, that is meteorologist Don Day joining us here a little bit longer today, but also with our long-range weather forecast. If you'd like to tune in each and every morning to his daily video podcast with his weather outlook, you can go to his website at dayweather.com. Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
You know, one of the most important components to any ranching operation is the water supply for your livestock, and one of the ways that we have been monitoring our water supply for the last several years is through a system from Tank Toad. We can keep a track on our cistern tank to know what the levels of that are. If we're losing water somewhere, maybe we got to float off, but nevertheless, if you want to try it out for yourself, give them a call if you'd like more information. Tanktoad.com is the website. All from the convenience of my phone, I can see what's going on my water supply, whether it's tank monitors, well controllers, generators, and more. Check them out online at tanktoad.com. You know, earlier in the show, as I was referencing with meteorologist Don Day about the drought map, and you look at that and you see some D3 and D4 areas. Well, those are also the same areas that are battling and have been battling some forest fires this summer. Well, those are also fellow ranchers just like you and me. And for some of those folks, they've lost some hay ground. They've lost some pasture ground. And I don't have everybody's resource. If folks in those states have some resources they can pass on to me, I will put that information out. I do, however, for folks in Wyoming, the University of Wyoming's Extension Office sending me some information as they've launched an emergency hay assistance site to assist with producers that have been facing these wildfires, whether you're wanting to donate hay or whether you're needing hay because you've lost hay or pasture ground. If you search in your Google browser, Wyoming Emergency Hay Assistance, you can find out more information there. Again, don't forget to tune in next week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. show, we'll be talking about the 10 reasons why you should not make hay. Tune in to find out how that goes. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you'd like to get a hold of me, it's pretty simple. You can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. If you have questions or show ideas, please feel free to let me know. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.